A schedule today that I'm moving too fast, so I'm going to give a really, really long sermon now. Okay? So just blame Leslie.
I've adjusted. The bagels are in.
Leslie was the one in school. Yeah, Leslie's the one in school who used to say to the teacher, "You forgot to give us homework." Yeah, we'll just let it. Look, this is all on her now. So I'm just saying, you're the one who said, give a really long sermon. So this week, we're going to celebrate the work of Martin Luther King Jr. His birthday is actually January 15th. Which in 1929 actually fell on a Tuesday. But the nature of American holidays is that they're often put to the Monday. And there's no better day than today to speak about courage in the face of extraordinary adversity. And there's no doubt that one of the defining characteristics of Martin Luther King Jr. was his courage in the face of adversity. And while there certainly were flaws in who he was, there can be no argument that he helped America take a giant leap forward as he ignited probably the greatest civil rights movement in our country's history. And we know that he couldn't have done it alone. In his book, Road to Character, David Brooks tells the story of a man named Bayard Rustin, an African-American leader in social movements for civil rights, socialism, nonviolence, and, in fact, at that time, gay rights. Rustin worked with A. Philip Randolph on the March on Washington in 1941 and to press for an end to racial discrimination in employment. Rustin later organized Freedom Rides and helped to organize the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to help strengthen Martin Luther King Jr.'s leadership and the teaching of King's approach to nonviolence. Rustin explained, "This requires physical self-discipline, marching into danger slowly and deliberately, keeping one's arms curled around one's head as the blows rain down. It requires emotional discipline, resisting the urge to feel resentment, maintaining a spirit of malice towards none, and charity to all. It requires, above all, the ability to absorb suffering." As King put it, the people who had suffered for so long had to endure more suffering if they were to end their oppression. Unearned suffering, King told us, was redemptive. Brooks concludes that the path to inner virtue meant suppressing personal anger and violent tendencies inside all of us. The only way to reduce the ugliness in the world is to reduce it in yourself, Rustin would later say. But we know Rustin wasn't perfect either. He had an undisciplined sexual life. He saw nonviolence as a means, as a protester, in order to help discipline himself against these corruptions. Some people try to recover from scandal by starting where they were and simply continuing through life. Some people strip themselves down and start again from the bottom. Rustin eventually understood that his new role was to serve his good cause, but not in the forefront, but in the background. And so this is where we begin with the story of Moshe. He wasn't perfect, but he was a study in courage and character. And there is one word in this morning's parsha that alerts us that we ought to be reading the story about Moshe through the lens of building character and exercising courage in the moment it's required. In fact, if you missed the one word the first time, you'd see it a second time. It says, Vayigdal hayeled vativaehu lebat paro. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who made him her son. And then just one sentence later, it says, Vayehi bayamim hahem vayigdal Moshe. And in those days when Moses grew up, he went out to see what was going on with his people. And he saw the labors, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew. And then it gives us this strange phrase, Ish ivri me'echav, one of his kinsfolks. And then in chapter 3, verse 1, Moses is called the son-in-law of the priest of Minyan. Moses is building character all throughout this morning's Parsha as we begin to figure out who he is. Is he a child of a Hebrew? Is he the son of the daughter of Pharaoh? Is he the son-in-law of the priest of Minyan? All the while we're wondering, who is this person Moses going to be as he grew into the man he would ultimately become? It's Rashi who starts the conversation for us about character, suggesting there are two ways that people grow in life. Doesn't Rashi say to us, doesn't the text refer to Moses' growth twice? Amar Rabbi Yehuda B'Rabbi Eliyai, quoting from the Yalkut Shemoni, he says, Harishon likoma v'hasheni ligdula. Moses grows in two different ways. He first grows as a person, physically, and then he grows in stature, grows into his character. Rashi is telling us that he is growing internally and externally simultaneously. He's gaining confidence and he's building courage. And it's Ibn Ezra that shows us how identity plays into who we are and who we strive to be. Hamitzrim kibe'armon hamelech haya v'ta'am me'achav achar hiskir ivri mimishpachto. Ibn Ezra says, did he first identify as an Egyptian or did he identify as a Jew? When it says he went out to his kinsfolk, was he referring to the Jewish people or was he referring to Egyptians? Who was he? Asks Ibn Ezra. Look, I know very little about biblical grammar, and I think I could translate the word for you, Vayigdal, as it was in the text rendered as he had grown. But it's clear to me that Moses, is far from being a complete project. That he is done. He is so far from becoming the Moses we want him to be, who we need him to be, who he ultimately will become. Moses is really just at his beginning, even though it says he was already grown up. We, of course, have skipped his entire childhood, went straight to his adulthood. And we remember that Moses was born a Jew. And we pray that all that while of growing up, that he remained connected to his Jewish people. We sometimes forget that he was raised with all of the trappings of the house of Pharaoh. We imagine Pharaoh knew that he was Jewish, but he had now become fully acculturated into Egyptian royalty. And that's why Ibn Ezra is confounded by the phrase me'achav, that he went out to his people. And so he says we need further clarification. In a world in which identity politics and defining ourselves, whether it be by gender or sexual preference or political party or tribe, we live in a world that is obsessed with who we are and how do we refer to others. We live in a world that rejects the notion that John Lennon put forth. Imagine there's no countries. Choosing rather always what Martin Luther King taught us. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Yet that too falls short. I rather choose what Natan Sharansky put forth in his incredible book on identity. Natan Sharansky, you of course remember, was the Jew sent to the Gulag and lived there for so many years. And how hard it must have been to remain a Jew while trapped in that jail in Siberia. To be who you are in a world that inflicts so much pain on people for who they are, it's hard to imagine what it means to be a square peg in a round hole. In his incredible book, Defending Identity, Sharansky explains that identity should be and can be a force for good, not simply a way to make someone else feel other. In simple terms, he explains that when we associate with a group, their values become our values. Their behaviors become our behaviors. And if you connect with a people who we believe is doing the job of bringing light to the world, then we believe individually we can bring light to the world. If we associate with a people that we believe whose job it is to bring kindness to the world, then we can be a source of kindness in the world. If we're supposed to be a light unto the nations, then we ourselves can be a light. If we're supposed to bring peace, then we should be a force for peace individually. But the challenge is simple, and that's how do we distance ourselves from those in our own tribe who behave poorly? And that is the job of character. We have examples. We saw Moses at the beginning of his journey, and he does something that shows courage in rising up against an Egyptian. He was very much an Egyptian, but he had the courage and character to rise up against one of his own. But I believed he learned that job from infancy, from 2 midwives named, and it's critical to see that they were named in this morning's Parashat, Shifra and Puah. They're named where Moses' mother is not, where Moses' sister is not, where Pharaoh's daughter's name is not. They're named, they're called out, and they should be emulated. In chapter 1, verse 15, and then 17, it says, Vayomer melech Mitzrayim el miladot ha'ivraot asher shema echad Shifra v'shem ha'shenit Puah. They're named in the Torah portion. These 2 midwives. Vatir'ena ha'miladot et ha'elohim. These 2 midwives saw God. V'lo asa kasher diber alehem melech Mitzrayim. And they ignored the wishes of the king of Egypt. The king of Egypt gave them instructions, but they had the courage to hear God in the world. Can you imagine what courage it must have taken for them to act in the way that they did? Not only did they ignore the command of Pharaoh, they actually worked actively against him. Like the righteous Gentiles who, in the face of the brutality of the Nazis, saved Jews. Shifra and Puah became role models for us. They saved Jews. And we're in desperate need of role models today. In the face of rampant hunger, in the face of a worldwide refugee crisis, in the face of illness, in the face of unchecked aggression, we need more role models like Zelensky or Malala or Mandela or the nameless groups of doctors who travel the world without borders to bring healing to those in need. We need politicians who will stand up and say, Ad kan v'lo hala. Here is the point in which we will not go any further in corruption. We live in a time of global challenges and a scarcity of people capable of addressing them. So as always, I'm asking not for you to become the next Gandhi or Schindler or Moses. All I'm asking is that you do one courageous thing. And then you'll begin a road to character that's worthy of being emulated. Shabbat Shalom.